Case File TR-8802. Elias Drum Taxidermy Studio, Rural Route 9, Colburn County, Arkansas. Inspection date, November 3rd. Filed by Colburn County Animal Control Officer Patricia Wexler, Supervising Inspector Dale Yount, and Dr. Marjorie Pell, DVM, representing the Colburn County Humane Society. This case began as a noise complaint. A neighbor, identified in the record only as Complainant A, reported sounds coming from the Drum property over a period of approximately 6 weeks. The sounds were described as intermittent, low, not mechanical. The complainant stated they did not believe the sounds were distress calls. They were not screaming, not acute. They were described as the kind of sound an animal makes when it is trying very hard to stay still. Officer Wexler and Inspector Yount conducted a preliminary welfare check on November 1st. Elias Drum answered the door. He was cooperative. He invited them in without hesitation. He offered coffee. The studio was tidy. Tools were organized on pegboards. Reference photographs were pinned in orderly rows. The mounted specimens were positioned throughout the main work floor and along 3 shelves running the length of the east wall. Inspector Yount counted 39 completed pieces and noted in his preliminary report that the workmanship was exceptional, among the finest he had seen in 30 years of animal control work. He noted something else. The studio smelled wrong. Not of decay, of warm animal, of fur and breath, and the faint metallic note that comes with a living body. He attributed this to recent work, fresh specimens not yet processed. He made no further note of it. Elias Drum walked them through the studio. He explained his process in broad terms, sourcing from licensed hunters and trappers, proper permits, standard chemicals. He was articulate. He smiled frequently. He did not seem nervous. They left satisfied. Dr. Marjorie Pell was not on the November 1st visit. She was called in on November 3rd because the complainant, Complainant A, had submitted a follow-up report. The sounds, they said, had changed. They were more frequent, and in the past 2 days, they had begun to sound like something was trying to move. Dr. Pell accompanied Officer Wexler on the return visit. Elias Drum answered the door again. He was still cooperative. He still offered coffee. Dr. Pell entered the studio. She later told this office that her first impression was identical to Yount's. The workmanship was extraordinary. The mounted deer in the center of the room, an 8-point buck posed mid-step, was, in her words, the most convincing specimen she had ever seen. The musculature was correct. The eye placement was correct. The fur lay in precisely the direction it would have on a living animal. She walked toward it. She put her hand on the flank. She said the hide was warm. She said she felt, under her palm, a slow and rhythmic movement. She stepped back. She looked at Elias Drum. He was watching her, with an expression she described as pleased. The way a craftsman looks when someone finally notices the quality of their work. Dr. Pell asked, "When did you acquire this animal?" Drum said, 2019. She asked, "What chemicals do you use for preservation?" He said, "My own formulations." He smiled. He said, "I find the standard methods don't hold the look I want." She asked him to step outside. She asked Officer Wexler to accompany Drum outside. Then she performed a rapid field assessment of every specimen in the room she could reach. 31 of the 39 specimens she examined had a detectable heartbeat. The heartbeats were slow, much slower than the resting rate for most of the species represented. Approximately 8 to 12 beats per minute. For reference, a resting deer's heart rate is 40 to 50 beats per minute. A resting crow's is approximately 300. What Dr. Pell was detecting was not consistent with any known metabolic state she could identify. The animals were mounted. The incisions were healed over. The chemical smell was pervasive. They did not move while she examined them, but they were not dead. She called this office at 11:23 a.m. The interview with Elias Drum, conducted in Officer Wexler's vehicle outside the studio, lasted approximately 40 minutes and yielded the following. Drum had been practicing taxidermy for 22 years. He had learned from his father, who had learned from his. He denied knowledge of any unusual characteristics in his specimens. He said he had never noticed anything unusual. He said, "Maybe your equipment is off." When Dr. Pell pressed him, specifically when she described placing her hand on the flank of the mounted deer and feeling it breathe, Drum was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It's the air handling in the room. The heat vents create pressure differentials. Things expand and contract. You're a veterinarian, not an HVAC technician." He said this calmly. He looked at his hands while he said it. He was asked if he would consent to a full inspection of the studio and removal of specimens for examination. He said, "Some of those pieces are sold. They belong to customers." He was asked for the names of the customers. He said he would have to check his records. He was cooperative for the remainder of the interview. He never became hostile. He never became upset. The studio was placed under a voluntary hold pending a warrant. Drum signed the hold agreement without objection. He was asked not to remove anything from the premises. He nodded. He said, "Of course." When investigators returned on November 5th with the warrant, Drum was not present. The studio was still locked. The specimens were undisturbed, 39 of them, exactly where they had been on the 3rd. Dr. Pell re-examined the same 31 specimens. 30 of them still had heartbeats. The mounted crow, specimen 14, a large common crow in a mid-flight pose, wings fully extended, fixed to a wooden base, had a heartbeat of approximately 2 beats per minute. 2 days earlier, it had been 11. It was placed in a sealed transport container and taken to the county veterinary examination facility. The examination lasted 90 minutes. The formal findings were as follows. The specimen displayed all anatomical characteristics of a taxidermy preparation. The brain cavity had been evacuated. Standard preservation chemicals were present in the tissue. There was no circulatory system intact in the conventional sense. The eyes were glass. There was no anatomical mechanism to account for the pulse Dr. Pell and 2 attending veterinarians confirmed during examination. The pulse was 14 beats per minute by the time the report was finalized. The specimen is currently in a locked freezer at the county veterinary facility. It has been at 32 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 days. Its pulse is down to 3 beats per minute. It has not yet stopped. Elias Drum was located on November 9th, staying at a motel in a neighboring county. He was brought in for a formal interview. He was not under arrest. He came willingly. The interview lasted 4 hours. For the first 3 hours, Drode maintained that he had no knowledge of any anomalous characteristics in his work. He said the specimens were crafted normally. He said Dr. Pell's findings were the result of equipment error. He said he would be happy to demonstrate his technique if it would help clarify matters. In the 4th hour, something changed. One of the investigators, near the end of the session, placed a photograph on the table. A still from the security camera, showing specimen 14 in its transport container. Drum looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he said, "They're not supposed to be this slow." The investigator asked him to explain. Drum said, "The rate is wrong. At room temperature, they should hold around 40, 50 beats. At 32 degrees, they should have gone out completely by now." He looked at the photograph again. He said, "That's not how it's supposed to work." He was asked, "How is it supposed to work?" He was quiet for a while. Then he said his father had called it suspension, not preservation. Suspension. The chemicals his father used, and his father before him, were designed to hold the animal in the moment just before death. Not to kill it, not to preserve a dead body, to hold it at the threshold and keep it there. He said, "They don't suffer. They're not aware. They're just suspended." He was asked, "Suspended in what?" He said, "Between." His word, between. He was asked how long this could be maintained. He said, "Indefinitely, in the right conditions." Some of his grandfather's pieces were still going. He said this without apparent distress. He said, "One of my grandfather's deer is in the State Natural History Museum. It's been there since 1962. This office has contacted the State Natural History Museum. The piece in question, a white-tailed deer attributed to the estate of Harlan Drum, acquired 1962, is currently on display in the permanent collection. We have requested an examination." The museum has not yet responded. The 30 specimens remaining in Drum's studio are still on the hold. We are currently working with 3 universities and 2 federal agencies to develop an examination protocol. There is significant disagreement about how to proceed, and in particular about whether what these specimens are experiencing constitutes a welfare concern under existing law. There is no existing statute that applies cleanly. Drum has been released pending further review. He is cooperative. He checks in weekly. He has not returned to the studio. He did ask us during his last check-in whether specimen 14 was still going. We told him it was. He nodded. He said, "Tell them to warm it up." He said it'll be easier on everyone. We have not warmed it up. This case is open. As a note to anyone currently holding a taxidermy specimen that may have been acquired from a studio in Colburn County or from the Drum family line, this office would like to hear from you. We are not here to confiscate your property. We want to understand the full scope of this. We have not yet released any information to the public about the State Natural History Museum inquiry. If you have recently been to the Natural History Museum, if you stopped in front of the white-tailed deer in the permanent collection, the one from 1962 in the low-lit alcove near the east entrance, and if you felt, when you stood there, that something about it was watching you back, you are not wrong. We are working on it.